Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
Team USA brings us together. Are the Bears leaving Chicago, and could Bryce Harper actually be a Yankee? It's all straight ahead on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey there, welcome in. We are back off and running on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Episode number 78 of the podcast. Lots to get into, plenty to discuss for today on the podcast. Now, I know some of you have asked, hey, where's the podcast been? I haven't seen any new episodes. That's because we haven't made any new episodes. Yes, I've been traveling with the family the last week or so, and then upon our return, we had some technical issues that we had to work out, but those are now in the rear view. We got lots to get into, including my new Chargers hat. What's that all about? I'll explain that coming up. But before we get into any of the topics over the last couple of weeks, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're taking the podcast in on. Like the episode, rate the episode, share it if you can, leave a review if you can. Only takes a second. It's absolutely free, but most importantly, hit subscribe. It really does help the podcast grow over time, and it really does help us out as we try to grow the podcast here in 2026. All right, so before we get into any of the sports stuff, you might be wondering, wait a second, why are you wearing a Chargers hat? Did you lose a bet? No, what I'm doing, and I'd like to start a movement of fans who are fans of bad teams. I have decided I am taking a one-year sabbatical from the Miami Dolphins. I'm a Dolphin fan, have been my entire life, and have gotten absolutely nothing out of the relationship. So they're not trying in 2026, so why should I be trying in 2026? So this is not a full-fledged divorce per se. It's just a trial separation. I'm seeing what my options are, and I've decided to go out on a date for a year with the LA Chargers and see if they can kind of give me some happiness in my NFL life, watching Mike McDaniel work with a actual, well-run organization for a change, and we'll see what happens in 2027. How about that? All right, so that's the Charger hat out of the way. The other big story from while we were away, obviously, was the Olympic Games, and most importantly, the thing that I watched was the Olympic men's hockey team winning gold, first time since 1980. It was so awesome, it got me to talk about hockey. It got me to lead with hockey on my very own podcast. And, the fallout from that win, there's a lot of different areas we'll go down here. But the first one was, the fact of Jack Hughes scoring the game-winning goal in overtime and the U.S. win, that this is somehow going to now propel hockey to a new level in terms of attention, in terms of audience. I'm skeptical. I think that by now we know where hockey fits, and we like our hockey in small doses. We love it at the Olympics. We love it in, an outdoor game with the four nations. But in terms of regular season NHL hockey, we don't really care. And it's never going to grow anything beyond that, I don't think. Although that's up to the young audience to decide. You know what did hit me and did surprise me from the Winter Olympics, especially that U.S. team winning and beating Canada the way they did in dramatic fashion. Again, first gold medal for U.S. hockey for the men since 1980. It was not just the hockey per se, it was the feeling. And look, maybe I'm, this should be old news because it's the Olympics and I don't really watch the Olympics. But, how often do we really get any experience anymore that bring people together? And I mean together, not niche, not, these people are over here and that person's over there, and we're all watching it, but we all have different feelings about it. It's not algorithm fed. It's not segmented into like 10 different timelines where everybody's experienced the same thing, but experiencing it in different ways. It was something that actually brought people together. And I guess that's what the Olympics are supposed to do. Doesn't feel like that's always the case. But this one event, this one game brought us to a shared experience. And it doesn't feel like those things exist anymore. I've talked to my wife about, is there anything that as a country could ever bring us together, because it seems like we're so fractured. And even in things that are supposed to bring us together, everybody's got a take, everybody's got a platform. Social media has turned every single thing, even tragedies, into content. So a lot of times, instead of grieving, it's people pointing fingers. This person's to blame, this group's to blame. It just goes back and forth endlessly. And everything is about assigning blame or farming engagement. And I'm not saying that there was no social media talk about that, but this game happened and the feelings were the same. The reaction was essentially the same. It was joy. It was pride. Now, during the game, it was also the same. It was tension. It was anxiety watching the game go back and forth. High-level hockey is amazing to watch. But, for just a few hours, it felt like people weren't divided. They weren't, screaming past each other. They were watching the same thing at the same time, feeling the same kind of things. And it doesn't feel like those type of experiences ever exist anymore, right? Reacting to the same goals, the same plays, the same penalties. That alone, to me, made this win special. That alone was more special in some ways than the first gold medal in men's hockey in 46 years or whatever itself. And the game, sometimes you get something hyped up and it doesn't live up to the hype. The game was awesome. It was fast. It was physical. It was high-level hockey. It was like playoff hockey, but one game wins it all. And the U.S. wins gold, and it was glorious. Now, look, I'm not naive enough to think that some people, some groups didn't take this as a way to spew some sort of negativity in one way or another, because that's what is the lifeblood of social media these days. But just know that the people that did that, they're miserable. And if you could not enjoy that win, if your takeaway was anything outside of pride or joy or excitement, that's a you problem. That's not an us problem. And it was nice to have a common experience in this digital age where everybody was feeling basically the same thing. The second thing that I took away, and this does go into the social media aspect of it, getting to the win for the U.S. was the number one thing. The number two thing was watching the Canadian fans experience heartbreak in real time. I got to be honest with you. When teams and fan bases lose big games, I love watching to experience the pain of other fans. While I'm not one of those fans, maybe that makes me a bad person. Misery loves company. I'm not sure. But I love watching the reaction of fans melting down in real time on my social media. It's like sports porn to me. It's just amazing. It's incredible. And what you notice about the Canadian fans, they did it with restraint. They did it with class. There were no F-bombs generally in videos. There was no destruction, punching walls. The Canadian fans mostly handled it the right way. There was shock. There was disappointment. There was pain for sure. But it was not ugly. It was not crass. They were more in just disbelief that this has happened. And given the emotions, that's impressive, because hockey is by far the number one sport in Canada. That would be like the U.S. losing a football game to some other country. It's unheard of. This has been a brutal stretch for Canadian sports fans. Think back, World Series, they lose that World Series they should have won. They lose both the men's and the women's Olympic hockey tournaments. And oh yeah, by the way, the sport that they love, the sport that is by far number one with men, women, everybody in Canada, that's their lifeblood, they've not won a Stanley Cup since 1993. That's decades now. And the Canadian sports fan, by and large, even with all that pain, I will say they showed far more grace than the actual people on the team. Because when it came to whining after the fact, maybe Canada can win a gold medal in that. First off was the head coach, John Cooper, who complained about the overtime being 3-on-3, that's not real hockey. They're just doing that for TV. It's TV-driven. They wouldn't use that in the Stanley Cup. They wouldn't use that in a real playoff. It's a terrible development, and kind of alluding to the fact that decided the game, right? That aspect favored the Americans in some way, which I think is ridiculous. And look, the idea of 3-on-3 hockey not being the best way to decide these things might be true, but you know what else it is? Completely irrelevant. When you don't get to complain after you lose if you didn't complain about it before the game. That's the rule, And that's always been the rule. You don't get to complain about something after the fact because it just sounds like sour grapes. And if you agree to a tournament, you agree to the format of that tournament, period. Once you lose, the only thing worse than losing is being a sore loser. And there's no way anybody could hear those comments, read those comments from John Cooper, and not think that he was a bigger loser than his team. And, the funniest part, if Canada wins that on 3-on-3 in regulation, there's no conversation from John Cooper. If anything, he'd probably be defending it, right? He'd probably praise the excitement of opening up the ice and praising the modern game. So the complaints about 3-on-3 hockey, he should pipe down. There's nothing good that's coming out of those comments. And then Nathan MacKinnon with the classic line of you be the judge of who the better team was on the ice. Well, here's the thing, Nathan MacKinnon. I don't need to be the judge. I don't need to look towards a judge because we have something better than a judge. We have a scoreboard. The scoreboard is the judge. So when you look at the scoreboard after a game, that tells you all you need to know. And this idea that pops up in sports from time to time, well, the better team doesn't always win. That's nonsense. The game itself determines who the best team is. Not shot totals, not possession charts, not this stat or that stat. We all agree. We build the team, and the test is the game itself, the tournament itself. We're not grading figure skating here. We're keeping score. There's a reason why the scoreboard is available for everybody to see. It's the most important part. So just to put this in different terms, if a boxing champion is taking on a challenger and is beating the challenger for 9 rounds, but in the 10th round, the challenger, after all that punishment, comes out and knocks out the champ, who's the best boxer that night? The guy holding the belt. That's the same thing here. The United States won the gold medal. Anything of sour grapes just makes you look like a bigger loser than you already were. The tournament is decided. It's not about who's the most. The U.S. might not be the most talented. They might not have controlled the action for most of the game. They weren't the most hyped. They don't have the greatest history, but that doesn't matter. That's why we play the games. Canada doesn't need the excuses. They don't need the hypotheticals. They would be better served, I think, in the long run of not making excuses and just accepting the fact. It's hard to do in the time, but to show some grace like their fans have. So congrats to the United States. Thanks for the moment. Thanks for the shared experience. It doesn't feel like we get many of those anymore. And for Canada, I would say better luck and wait for 2030, which feels like it's a very long time away. And it's probably 2030. That's probably the next time that I'll be leading with hockey in any way, shape, or form. Okay, let's move on to a little baseball talk. And man, spring training at this point is food for the soul. Opening day, especially here in the Northeast, cannot get here soon enough. Now, we might have piles of snow still on opening day, but, we need the optimism of opening day. But optimism is not in full supply everywhere because there's an interesting situation going on with the Philadelphia Phillies. And there's a little smoke in the air when it comes to the Phillies. And when smoke shows up with an organization in like February, it's only a matter of time before people are going to start scanning the horizon for a full-blown fire, right? And that's where the Bryce Harper situation is right now. Smoke, not full-fledged fire. It's not a 5-alarmer yet, but it does feel like it's going that way. So Harper, now 33 years old, has kind of found himself in the bit of a budding controversy. Again, it's not a 5-alarm fire just yet, but it does start to point to maybe a possible rift between a star player and an organization. And this dates back to last October when Dave Dombrowski, the head of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies, was having, I guess, his roundup of last season after the Phillies had been eliminated from the postseason. And he was asked some questions about Bryce Harper. And his comments gained some attention at the time, but it's clear, even though it's back in October, those comments aren't going away. So at the time he said, Harper's still a star player, an all-star caliber player, but that he didn't have an elite season like he's had in the past. And I think he said something along the lines of, I guess we'll only see if he becomes elite again or if he just continues to be good. Now, those comments outside of sports, outside of professional sports, don't seem all that damaging, right? And they might kind of seem kind of harmless and kind of true, right? Bryce Harper did not have an elite season last year. But when you start bringing up words like, can he still be elite or is he just going to be good? It's hard not to see that as a direct challenge against the player himself. So obviously, fast forward to spring training, Bryce Harper showed up the other day. And, those comments, even though they were back in October, he was going to be asked about those comments, and he did respond. He didn't buy into it. He didn't feed the fire all that much, but he did say that it was kind of a wild situation and that when he joined the organization, he felt like this was an organization that was going to kind of keep that kind of stuff in-house and not kind of make headlines with those kind of comments. And it was pretty clear, even though he didn't say so, he tried to make it seem like he doesn't get caught up in all that type of stuff. But you can tell, as with any star player, comments like that coming from your own team are going to kind of annoy you. So that's what's kind of bubbling up in Philadelphia right now. And it's not nothing, all right? Like, that's a star player openly saying in some ways that there is an issue there. Now, maybe it's not a rift. Maybe the trust has not been completely shattered. But the fact that we're talking about comments from October being brought up on the first day of spring training doesn't exactly speak greatly about the relationship between organization and player. And predictably, when a hint of tension exists, the rumor mill is going to start going, the trade proposals are going to pop up. And I have seen a few in regards to Bryce Harper and the New York Yankees. And if the Phillies ever decide to move him, what are some destinations that might be interested? And of course, the Yankees are one of those. And look, on the surface, I get why people would talk about it, because if nothing else, the Phillies and Yankees are kind of in the same position. They're both good teams, not great teams, haven't won championships, had quiet off seasons. And I think not that this is a major factor, but I think that fan bases for both organizations are kind of wanting the big move, right? Neither team really made one this offseason. But I would say to Yankee fans specifically, don't let your imagination run wild with you, because I'm here to tell you, you can forget about Bryce Harper ever wearing a Yankee uniform, because it's not happening. We know that it's not happening. And I get that spring training is a time for believing and optimism, all this type of stuff. And the first reason why it's not going to happen is because the Yankees already had their chance. This is obvious. It gets ignored sometimes, and I guess it's been long enough now that people maybe forgot or just ignore it, whatever. Back in 2018, Bryce Harper was a free agent, 26 years old, in his physical prime, and the Yankees weren't interested. They never made an offer. Not an introductory one, not one that wasn't good enough based on what the film. No, they didn't make an offer. They weren't interested. So let's think this through here. If they weren't interested in Bryce Harper at 26 in his physical prime, why would they suddenly be interested at 33? Again, this is not one where the Yankees made an offer and it just simply wasn't good enough. They weren't interested at all in the player. Then there's the money aspect of this. The Yankees' payroll is at the top of what Hal Steinbrenner is willing to pay. Lost in all of the conversation that the Yankees are running it back, they're not running it back, they are running it back, it's the same team, it's not the same team. The reason, it's not that the Yankees, and we've covered this on previous episodes, it's not that the Yankees truly believe that this team is so great it can't have improvement. It's that Hal Steinbrenner is not going to approve another large expense without a major subtraction. And Harper's salary, while it's not, outrageous in terms of today's standards, it's the amount of years, not what it is the year to year. So to break down his contract a little bit, he has still 6 years left on his contract. 6 years left on his contract. The next 3, he's making 27.5. The following 3, he's making 23.5, which of course is not crazy. But again, it's 6 more seasons for a guy who's already 33 and is not, let's be honest, I like Bryce Harper a lot. I've always been a fan. He's not exactly Cal Ripken Jr. when it comes to games played in a season. He's had some injuries in the past. Do you think that those injuries are going to go away when he's 33, 34, 35? I don't think so. And then there's the final point, which is really how this whole thing got started. The warning signs for Bryce Harper, they might be uncomfortable to talk about, especially if you're a Philly fan. They're showing up. Harper is still a very good player, but the data says his era of being a superstar is likely over. So go back to last season. 2025 posted his lowest OPS since 2016 and posted his lowest OPS plus since 2019. So his batting average, which is not a judge that most teams use, but I know fans love it, it dropped 20 points below his career norm. So those numbers, they're not catastrophic. It might be a reason for the Phillies to kind of investigate what a trade might look like for Bryce Harper before the bottom falls out. But those are numbers in decline. And when you take a look at his discipline at the plate and the underlying numbers, they're concerning. His chase rate last year was just 11th percentile across Major League Baseball in 2025. So pitchers were challenging Bryce Harper in the strike zone only 43% of the time. They were getting him to chase their pitch. And that 43%, that was the lowest rate among about 500 qualified hitters. So take a step back. That's not pitchers fearing him anymore. That's pitchers exploiting him. And then there's the age thing as well, right? Like 33, we're kind of past the point of where guys would just keep getting better in their late 30s or mid 30s. He's past the point where bat speed typically starts to slow down or drop off. His zip projections for 2026, I think they put him at about 24 home runs and roughly a 3-win player, 3 WAR, which is still solid, but it's nowhere near elite. It's not near the top of Major League Baseball hitters. So yeah, there are some real warning signs that Bryce Harper has hit the decline phase. Now, to be fair, there are counter arguments to that. He dealt with elbow and wrist issues in 2025, although that kind of goes into the injury stuff. So maybe that's a factor. Maybe he's over those injuries now. His hard hit rate, his exit velocity were still strong. I know Scott Boras has talked about how he did not have Harper the right lineup protection, and that forced him to chase pitches more and more. And look, all of that can be true in a vacuum, but I would say in terms of Bryce Harper and a possible destination of the Bronx, which at one time seemed inevitable, let's connect the dots here. He is an aging star. He has still, I would say, a massive contract. He has the early signs of regression. He has a front office in the Yankees that already passed on the player when he was younger, healthier, and in his physical prime. And you'd also have to kind of add into the fact here, Ben Rice was not all that far off from Bryce Harper's production last year. So when you add up all those things, Bryce Harper is not or will never be a Yankee target. Yes, he's still got the big name. He can still be a productive player at times. But this version of Bryce Harper, or at least the one that made people think of, future Hall of Fame type player, that guy is probably gone if he has one more season and you're still paying him for 6 more seasons. And the idea of him ever wearing pinstripes, that window is closed. So I would say to Yankee fans, enjoy spring training. Dream big of the season. Get ready. I'm sure the Yankees will make a move or two in season if need be. But if you have dreams of Bryce Harper ever wearing a Yankee uniform or anytime soon wearing a Yankee uniform, I would say keep dreaming. That's the type of thing for Photoshop. It's not the type of thing for reality.
Remember college?
Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
Okay, finally, let's hit on an NFL story today for the podcast. We'll focus on the draft a little bit down the road. There's a lot of groupthink going on there, but we'll get into that in a couple of weeks. But I did want to hit on the stadium situation with the Chicago Bears. You've probably seen the headlines that the Bears could be moving out of Soldier Field. They could be leaving Chicago altogether. In a couple of years, are we going to have to talk about the Indiana Bears? That just doesn't sound right. So what the heck is going on with the Bears, the state of Illinois, the stadium situation? And I want to try to break this down in simple terms, right? In normal, plain English. Because a lot of times with these stadium situations, especially the Bears one, I think think that they make it confusing on purpose to kind of distract the public from what is actually going on. And the Bears stadium situation is not new. This has been going on for a while. And to start, we'll go back a couple of years. 2024, the Bears had purchased land in a town called Arlington Heights in Illinois for about $200 million. Arlington Heights is about 30 miles away from where Soldier Field is located. And the plan was pretty simple. Bears would move out of Soldier Field. They would build themselves a new stadium and an entertainment complex, and they would leave Soldier Field, which has been part of their identity, and they would move out of the city of Chicago. So that part is kind of straightforward, although there's debate about, what's going to happen. The part where it really gets messy, which is like in most of these situations, is who's paying for what? Where is the money coming from for the stadium, for all the things that go into building a stadium? So two things are basically unresolved, and these are the major sticking points for the team and the state of Illinois. The Bears want certainty on taxes, long-term certainty, especially on property taxes, right? They don't want them to spike later on, and all of a sudden, they go up 20%. They want cost certainty for what they're going to have to pay the state. And they want a sales tax exemption on all the construction materials. So again, they want to make the best deal for themselves in terms of building the stadium. And local officials, to their credit, back in 2024, they did cut a deal to freeze the property taxes, which I think would cap the Bears' contribution at about $3.6 million a year. The catch there is, even though the legislature had agreed to it, they're yet to approve it. And even though they agreed to it back then, they didn't approve it at that time, and they've still not approved it even a couple of years later. The other big thing in this is the infrastructure money. The Bears continue to say publicly that they are going to build the stadium themselves. They just want the state to kick in some cash to pay for the infrastructure, the roads, the water, the sewage, all that type of stuff. And that seems fair. That seems like a plan, right? The problem is that the Bears want the state of Illinois to pay roughly $850 million for this infrastructure. Boy, these roads are going to be amazing. And they say that they need that money to support the stadium in Arlington Heights. Again, it's not for the stadium per se. It's all the stuff around the stadium. And $850 million, that's a pretty big price tag for some roads and some infrastructure. And the reason why the state is obviously hesitant and has not been able to agree on a deal, number one, I don't know if you've seen the state of the world. This is not exactly a top legislative priority in Chicago, in Illinois. And many representatives, they represent Chicago. So they don't like the idea of helping the Bears leave the city. Doesn't exactly look good for them. And the Bears are asking for, again, they say $850 million. Let's just call it $1 billion. In public money, they want tax breaks for everything that they are going to be responsible for, while they're also trying to insist that they're paying for the stadium themselves. They just want some help with the infrastructure. And I think what really sticks in the craw of the politicians, and it should stick in the craw of the public, is that the taxpayers are still footing the bill for the last renovation to Soldier Field back in 2003. About $350 million is still owed for that renovation back in 2003. Now, that was supposed to be covered by hotel taxes. They always tell you the hotel, this is going to pay for itself. Yeah, okay. Now, they've had a downturn because of the pandemic and because weaker tourism, but that means the taxpayers are footing that bill still. And the Bears have obviously showed zero interest in trying to fix that debt, even though they're asking for more help in building a new stadium outside of the city of Chicago. And another part of this, which is I almost think intentionally misleading, is the Bears spokesman, Kevin Warren. He issued an open letter which said, again, Bears, we're not asking for tax money. We're going to build the system. We're going to build the stadium ourselves. We're only asking for the essentials of infrastructure. And look, I guess if you were to hook them up to a polygraph, that is technically true, but it's extremely misleading because, look, the infrastructure costs are $850 million. Just to kind of put that in some perspective, because, these numbers, they become silly. They become outrageous. It's impossible to have any perspective on these things. But the $850 million, that's roughly the same amount of money that the new Bills Stadium is going to, that's the public money that they got, and that's one of the largestly publicly funded stadiums. At least they said that we're building the stadium with this money. We're not trying to point it as infrastructure. And when the Rams built SoFi Stadium out in LA, they paid for both the stadium and the infrastructure themselves. After all, they're the ones that are going to be collecting the money from it, so they should be the ones paying for it. So when the Bears say we're paying for the stadium, it's not really true, and it's semantics at this point. It's basically a shell game where they're saying we're doing this and we're just only asking for that. But when you put real numbers on it, it's outrageous. So the easiest way to look at it, there's no real difference between the Bears saying we're going to pay for a $3 billion stadium where the state chips in $900 million, or we're going to build a $2.1 billion stadium where the state pays $900 million for infrastructure. Coming up with the term infrastructure makes it seem like that the Bears ask is a fair one. When you look at the numbers, it says something else. So either way, the Bears are paying the same amount, and the taxpayers, again, are on the hook for money that wouldn't exist, except for the fact that the Bears want to build themselves a new stadium and want the taxpayer to kind of foot the bill in a long way. And look, the Bears bought that land back in whenever it was in Arlington Heights for the $200 million. It was cheap because there was no infrastructure, right? And now they're pretending like the state building the infrastructure is not them building the stadium itself. That's why they were able to get the land so cheap back then. So where Indiana comes into this, recently the Bears put out a statement praising Indiana for passing legislation that could theoretically support a move for the Bears. People have wondered, is this leverage? Is this just a bluff? Is this a real option? Obviously, nobody really knows outside of the rooms that these deals are being negotiated in. And it does put pressure on Illinois lawmakers while also allowing the Bears to kind of claim that we're being forced to look other places. We've been talking to the state for a very long time and we can't make a deal. So look, it's a very complicated situation because at the end of the day, all of these stadium deals, the one in Kansas City, the one in Buffalo, the one here, Cleveland they're all very political. The money being asked for is enormous, and the Bears are framing the asks as, they're completely downplaying the public cost of this. And the taxpayers, again, are footing the bill, at least in large part, to the stadium, which they're not really seeing any benefits to outside of being a fan of the Bears. And look, stadium deals forever. We've talked about this forever. They exploit emotional connections to sports. They leverage the threat of relocation to secure public funding, tax breaks, favorable lease terms. All the money is going into them. They're the ones making the money from it, but they're not the ones paying for it. And politicians often feel like approve these deals because they wrongly expect, a lot of times, significant economic development and improvement, and they're going to make this money back in this form and that form. And there's been countless studies done that show that these deals have little to no net benefit compared to what private investment would be. But if you're a fan who's not watching this and not covering stadium deals, this deal and that deal and all the other, you're thinking to yourself, well, why won't the state just help pay for some roads? When in reality, the conversation should be centered, why should taxpayers be giving nearly $1 billion to billionaires who are already there, and they're getting tax breaks and all this public money, and we're still paying off the last favor, right? We're still paying off the renovation from 2003. So look, this is the dance of negotiation. This is what goes on. I think that the Bears will end up eventually in Arlington Hills because that Indiana proposal does come with some of its own issues that would have to be worked out. And in terms of time, in terms of financing, the financing is one thing, but that area near, I think it's Hammond, Indiana, it currently lacks even the infrastructure that the Bears Arlington Heights site already has. So they would have to do even more building, even more infrastructure there that would be able to handle like a game day traffic for a football game, which is, 70, 80,000 people. Plus the Bears still have a lease at Soldier Field through 2033. That lease doesn't come up anytime soon. And leaving, I guess if they wanted to, they could, but it's going to incur penalties. It's going to be, I would think a complex kind of legal situation with the state. And there's no guarantee, as this thing kind of draws out, that before the current lease expires, they would have any guarantee before the current lease expires that could get them to play somewhere else before a deal is actually finalized. So those upgrades, they could be very time consuming, they could be costly, they could be potentially deadlines in terms of increasing the public burden and the amount of money that would be required to kind of fill those holes. But that's kind of what is at the heart of the dispute. And again, I think that these things are left intentionally confusing to confuse the public. But until everybody's kind of honest, these things are going to kind of drag out. And given the history of Chicago politics, of politics in general, I guess expecting anyone to be honest with the public, that's probably a bridge too far. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. We will be back later this week with another episode. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you later this week right here on Gordon Damer on Sports.